Hello and welcome to another episode of the BetaKit Podcast. I am Douglas Saltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit, and with me this week is Christian Weedbrook, CEO of Canadian quantum company Xanadu. Now, when we last had Christian on the podcast, he was talking about his plans to raise $200 million to build a quantum data center right on Lake Ontario. This week on the episode, he's back, ready to announce a packaging plant. Well, it's not just any packaging plant. It's an advanced photonics packaging plant. And on this episode of the podcast, he's going to explain what that means, where Xanadu is on its quantum scaling journey, and why all of a sudden everyone in Canada is interested in both our economic and quantum sovereignty. So, why is everyone suddenly talking about quantum? Let's dig in. Imagine learning the latest breakthroughs in AI and data science directly from the world's top experts. This year, KDD 2025 is coming to Toronto, bringing the leading conference on knowledge discovery and data mining to Canada. From cutting-edge research to real-world industry solutions, KDD is where innovation happens. Between August 3rd and 7th at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, connect with global leaders and transform your ideas into impact. Register now at kdd2025.kdd.org and be part of shaping the future of data and AI. Christian, thank you so much for coming here. Last time we had you on the podcast, we basically used you as an educational tool. I like very much like a Muppet, like a Sesame Street situation, where you as a subject matter expert explained to our audience in very, very small words what quantum technology is and what a quantum data center might be. Mm-hmm. This time, I want to talk a little bit more about where your company is at on its journey to that dream. And I want to start with the announcement that you made this week at Toronto Tech Week, this advanced photonics packaging plant.
That's right.
Explain to me what that is and maybe what it enables for Xanadu.
Yeah, I always like to go back to something we're always kind of more familiar with. And so if you look at the chips in our phones and computers and that, the chip doesn't, you need to be able to access the chip. So it needs to be packaged. You need the electronics to be connected to the chip. And so we're building quantum computers, and the same thing applies. Our quantum computers, at the heart of it are these photonic chips, and we need to control them and use them somehow. So you need to be able to package them, which essentially means how do you connect light, how do you connect electronics to these chips so you can actually use them?
Okay. So in the Xanadu hierarchy of needs, you want to be making quantum chips. You want to be doing that in service of one day of your dream of the quantum data centers, which again, we've got a whole episode that you can go watch about what that is about. This is that facilitation level of, if we're going to be building these chips, if we're going to be using them in service, we've got to package them together. We've got to get the additional components together. This is you kind of building your logistical stack to deliver.
Yeah, that's right. It's, as you said, our main goal is to build a quantum data center. And like normal data centers, you have hundreds or thousands of server racks that are networked together. And the server racks would have GPUs, for instance. And so ours will have quantum chips. And like GPUs, they need to be packaged. So it's a vital part of things that we want control over. We want to do it here in Toronto, and it's important for them to be packaged so then we can ultimately build our data center out of it.
Okay. Is this something that you're doing because it is more cost effective and smarter to own more of your stack? Is it because, again, when we're talking about like in the quantum space, a lot of this is bleeding edge or emergent field, no one else is doing this? Or at some point we're going to use the word sovereignty. Is this more of a nationalistic type of consideration? Because, that data center that you want to build kind of like the waterfront, Lake Ontario, probably somewhere around where we're recording maybe. Is this more of convenience of logistics, or is there a broader strategy or necessity here to getting access to this component? or these types of components?
Yeah, all the things you mentioned would apply here. They're all equally important. But it really started off with the fact that to package these chips, we need the performance to be kind of off the charts, to be
Mm,
very, very good. So you can package things, but you may not be able to package them in the most efficient way for a quantum computer. And so we've worked with other companies in the past, I believe in the US, that could do the packaging for us. But in terms of timing and having control over as many things as possible, ultimately no one cares about our quantum computers more than what we do.
gotcha.
So this parameter that we care about is loss, and so we need these chips and the packaging to be as low loss as possible. And we're the best people ultimately to do that. The other thing too is that historically, loss people haven't really cared about too much, and so it's something that you can just really overcome by boosting the power,
Okay.
essentially. So, chips are packaged all the time, but they haven't had to care about this. So, on top of the fact that we can do it better than anyone else, other folks hasn't been a real issue. So now we can do it. And the best thing about this is that we need it for ourselves, but this is a very, very low loss packaging facility, probably the lowest loss anywhere in the world. And we're doing it here in Toronto. And so what that means is we can now allow other companies to use our packaging facilities here as well. So we're really excited, not only the fact that it allows us to control the process, but because now we can start making, more revenue by letting other companies use it as well.
Okay. Bunch of strategics. Like you're tired of vendors, you want to do it yourself.
Hmm.
Doing it yourself means that you get to be a vendor, sell through. Can you go back to like the loss component and like what other facilities are able to do? Like maybe even comparison to traditional chipsets. Is it a factor of take your standard like whatever AMD chip or whatever that
Hmm.
people are using for computer games. They're making so many of those. It's such
Hmm.
a commoditized and established process that they're not worried about production issues or like either because they're making so many or they've nailed that process so perfectly that it's not a consideration. I'm assuming
Hmm.
in a quantum environment there's like a bunch of like really specific novel technical issues or the technology the process isn't as established. Is that like what you're referring to when it comes to that kind of loss?
Loss is actually very much a unique feature of photonic
Okay.
systems. So whether it's quantum photonics or just photonics for datacom or telecommunication, whenever you send lasers through fiber optics or through chips, whatever you send through, not everything makes it to the outside. So from start to finish. And the reason is some of the photons, some parts of the light get absorbed or scattered. So when the information doesn't make it all the way from the start to the finish, it's called loss. And it's very much a unique feature of photonic systems, whether it's quantum or classical. And so with normal computers like GPU, they have their own issues, but they don't really care about loss. But you do care about loss for datacom and sharing information around data centers as well, which is photonics. So it's very much a unique feature of photonics. And for us, historically, it's affects quantum systems. So for traditional non-quantum systems, whenever you lose information or some of the laser doesn't make it from start to finish, you turn up the power. So you send more laser light through from
Okay.
start to finish. You can you can compensate for that. But what happens if you try to do the same thing for quantum computers? You actually add more noise. It becomes
Mm,
worse. And ultimately comes back to the uncertainty principle. And so now you've got to find ways to make it as low loss as possible. And so that comes back to our packaging system. The packaging, as I mentioned, you want to connect. How do you get light on a chip? Well, you have a laser that's just a source, and you put the laser into fiber optics, and then you connect the fiber optics to the chip. It's kind of the funnel for it to go on. But you want to be very careful how you package or connect the fiber to the chip. Because if you don't do it that well, loss increases. And
gotcha.
so that's really the point of the packaging system, and loss is very much a photonic thing.
Okay. So I was taking this more in like an industrialized production assembly. You're going to have, maybe like 99.5% of the what's made there working and there's an acceptable amount of like production loss. You're actually talking about this is much more of a situation where like every one of these things is a Ferrari that needs to
Hmm.
be perfectly calibrated.
That's right.
Otherwise it won't work at all.
That's right. And then not only that, but to your point, we will have to start, I'm talking about attaching one fiber to one chip. At some point, probably the end of this year, we're going to have to think about scaling up and mass manufacturing. And so thinking about what you said then, kind of I think of like it's the yield, what you
Okay.
mentioned. And to your point, like a lot of traditional chip foundries been around since the 60s or so, they've really mastered that. And so most chips work. So the yield is very high. We'll have to work on that. But even before we get to that point, we have to worry about just the individual fiber to chip coupling.
Okay. So it makes sense for you to be investing in this, even though I am sure it is as expensive as everything else that you have to do in both like the hardware space and then quantum and photonic space. Are there other steps along this process that you're looking to integrate and verticalize, either because again you get that additional control, quality component, or again you're maybe looking to be a production leader in this space in Canada and get some financial return for, I guess, what is significant capex to make this
Hmm.
happen?
Yeah, let me see. Like, so, the end goal is to build this data center. This data center has a lot of server racks, quantum server racks. So, and we can just think about one server rack because we'll be
Mm.
copying and pasting
Yeah,
hundreds or thousands of these.
yeah. And the reason why, again, if you watch the past episode, is because he wants to make quantum Netflix. That's all that I took away from that episode, which you can
Mhm.
watch probably right here that I'm pointing to with the link.
That's all I took away from it as well. I think, and so building this data center, and say part of one server rack, we do everything at the moment. So except the chip manufacturing. So it starts off in our office in Toronto. We have folks doing chip designs. So they design the chips, what they should look like. Then we send this data off to a foundry, and they make chips, the wafers for us. After that, once we get it back, we do everything ourselves. So our packaging facility can also do the test and measuring of the wafers. How good are they?
Yeah,
Are they up to our specs? It also dices the wafers into smaller chips, so it kind of cuts it up or carves it up into smaller chips. And then we package, as I mentioned before. Once it's packaged, then we can do the assembly phase, which is basically putting everything else together, including the chips, into the server rack that I mentioned before. So getting back to your point, it's very much apart from making the wafers, it's very much end to end from our side, except that part. So,
and then all the wafers are done internationally.
yeah,
I'm
we
assuming.
work with, yeah, that's right. There's probably 6 or 7 foundries around the world that we work with, and they do it for us. And there's also, you often hear about silicon chips, silicon wafers.
Yeah.
We use three or four different types of materials, not just silicon. And thankfully, these
Adding
foundries,
complexity.
yeah, adding complexity and specifically adding the layers to it
Mm,
with different materials and so
okay.
forth, depending on what our needs are.
Okay. So again, back to that idea, you're getting closer and closer and closer to being able to say, "Hey, we own everything from wafer to
The full
just
assembly, the server
rack."
racks. Yeah, that's right.
And
That's right.
then I'm assuming next step is mass production of that, or
Yeah.
to get from rack to data center. What are the additional considerations there? Like, would you be taking on like power considerations, management of the data center there, or you just kind of want to be like, we want to supply these wonderful racks to be able to do this thing?
We like to do as much as possible ourselves. So we're thinking of, as you mentioned, the world's first quantum data center here in Toronto. And it would be just a data center with thousands of server racks. So once we have mastered a single server rack, it really is raising more money to copy and paste that.
Sure.
Now, if you look at a single server rack, as you were mentioning, each server rack, for instance, has, we had 4 server racks. That was kind of our big push for our current fundraise. And the 4 server racks have 35 photonic chips in them. Now we're going to have to build, condense it even more. But you can imagine having thousands of these things. Now you are going to have to look at how to, rather than doing prototyping, how to mass manufacture. So even though it won't be, we're selling these data racks, these server racks. We're just building our own data center, and we'll own that ourselves and operate ourselves. Now, having said that, there's a lot of things, as you mentioned, that are overlapping with normal data centers, and there's companies that help build Amazon's and Google's data centers. So we'll also work with them, and we're starting to think about probably starting that by the end of this year to do that. our focus at this point has been really mastering a single server rack
Yeah.
before it needs to go into mass production after
Okay.
that. But a lot of the other stuff you mentioned, we'll try to do as much as possible. And we are looking to expand even our packaging facility beyond with what we had. And as you would have seen, it cost us $10 million to do that.
Yeah.
And we want to do more of it. And there's more than just the use cases for quantum computing as well.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned the $10 million. I'm assuming, I think in the announcement it was noted this partially covered through the Strategic Innovation Fund
Yes, that's
funding.
right. Yes.
Was that in relation to the money that Xanadu got in 2023 has been applied
that's
for this?
right. Yeah, we
Okay.
got 40 million from the federal government.
And then it was just 10 million straight up to make this component of this process happen.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
To get to, we can make 4 racks.
Yeah, it was partly, we made the 4 racks before that. So we were originally using others to help us with that. But, it's like, well, we can probably do this better ourselves and have full control over it. There's simple things like, even when you work with any partner, you got to ring them up or email them and say, when is this part due?
Yeah.
You can just, someone that's working side by side at our facility in downtown Toronto can sort of say, well, I can just go over and ask them. And I can say, I need this by a certain amount of time, and just speeds things up so dramatically, because quantum computing and the building of a quantum data center, it is a current sort of space race that all countries are looking at doing. And so you mentioned the sovereign aspect. That's huge because Canada needs to do this. And so we're one of the leaders in the world, and, we love being here in Canada.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about the sovereignty thing in a minute, but I maybe want to connect some additional threads here of other partnerships that you've announced in like the last year or so that I wanted to catch up on. So like stuff with Corning, Applied Materials, DARPA, the US Air Force Research Lab. Are all of these additional partnerships towards that, I guess, Xanadu owning or at least managing as much as possible of this like production logistical facilitation stack towards the data center outcome? Because like I think it's Corning does like specific types of like really, really hard glass and things
for
like that.
fiber optics. That's right.
So like, are each of these partnerships kind of in line with, hey, there's this other subject matter experts over here. Maybe we don't want to use them as a vendor, but we're going to work together because again, this is novel. The value comes in us maybe soup to nuts being able to own production of this. Are any of these like outside of that in terms of like the overall strategy?
I think the Corning definitely is, and then the AMAT Applied Materials definitely is as well. DARPA is a little bit different. Everything ultimately comes back to our data center. The DARPA one is has a program called QBI, and QBI has 3 phases. The first phase is $1 million, and then the third phase is up to 300 million. So they were able to attract some of the best quantum companies in the world to get into this program. And what that does is not only if you're successful, you can get quite a large amount of money, which in our case would go back to building the data center. But it's also a huge validation point. So we made it in the top 18 companies in first phase, teams working very hard to try and get into the second phase. And that's really important. So it doesn't explicitly add to the data center yet, but if we continue to perform, we actually get then a lot of validation from the U.S. government, and also more future funding that can go back to the data center.
Is this kind of you keeping that that hand in continual R&D and maybe offsetting capital expenditure to stay at the front of the industry?
That's right.
These are the mechanisms for it. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you explain if there is or what the military use or interest of quantum technology or photonic technology is?
Well, I think, if you look at things like the internet, all the kind of wonderful technology you have, a lot of it traces back to the military, the US military. So we've worked with DARPA. This is our 4th project with them, and we have 2 concurrently, including the one I mentioned. I guess the big thing was, in general, they like to see what the latest technologies are, particularly in computation. So that's kind of a standard thing where quantum fits in nicely with that. The other big thing is originally where people got excited about quantum computing was a theoretical result in 1994 that said if you had a large enough quantum computer, you could actually break security protocols and particularly the internet. So this comes back to the nation and sovereign aspect of things, where a lot of countries are racing to build it, and that's one of the key applications. Not for, say, a company like Xanadu or a startup, but for the government. So
Yeah.
the military obviously is really interested in cryptography and the breaking and hacking of codes, and
Or
this fits
also like
into it.
the prevention of that happening because we will have
Yeah,
quantum passwords that are
yeah. There's So there's other ways of a quantum computer can actually cause harm in that sense, but there's also companies working on new codes that can replace our current codes that a quantum computer would not be able to break. And
okay.
so they're working on, to really understand encryption and decryption, you really have to work on, the white hat and the black hat side of things
Yeah.
as well.
Okay. So tying this then to this sovereignty, I guess, conversation. Um, I think we're more along the lines of where do we want this future technology to be built?
Hmm.
Where is the benefit if it's built in Canada? Where is the loss if it's built somewhere else? I think anyone who has consumed any of like our hardware coverage on BetaKit knows that there's like a long history of Canada of semiconductor production and innovation that has not remained consistent.
Yes.
And like some of our other industries that haven't received consistent support, it's much harder to spin up that subject matter expertise again, because when you have to
Mm.
build these things and because of their high costs, you can build the right facility at the wrong time, lose a bunch of money, and then wait another decade to try it all again. I'm assuming there's some of that here. You've
Yes.
also talked a little bit about like wanting to own the IP, own the
Hmm.
innovation side of it. But I want to tie this back to I think the last time we spoke with you, because you said this, we've been offered, at least suggested, why don't you move your headquarters to the US? The only way we'll move our headquarters outside of Toronto or Canada is if I get fired. I think that was in like 2022.
Right.
Big thing that's changed since then is
Hmm.
that the whole country has seemed to awoken to this
Yeah.
idea of Canadian sovereignty across all lenses. So with that kind of level set, I want to maybe talk to you a little bit about whether or not you've seen a change in reaction to your work, increased reception, knowing that the new AI minister, Evan Solomon, was at
Hmm.
your packaging facility launch on Monday at the start of Toronto Tech Week. He's also been saying quite a few things about IP ownership, quantum NAI regulation. Do you feel like you were just like ahead of the game and now at a federal level you're being heard when it comes to this stuff?
I think so. It was very exciting to have Minister Solomon come and open up our packaging facility, as you mentioned. I think only the week or at most 2 weeks before that, I was invited to an event by where Prime Minister Carney spoke as well,
Mhm.
and I managed to get a couple of minutes with him and quantum. And in that event, that's the sort of announcement where he said he's going to speed up hitting NATO's goals this year.
Yeah.
In that speech, he mentioned quantum 2 or 3 times.
Mm.
So that was great at the very highest level. The current government is really plugged into what's needed. Quantum computing is getting mentioned explicitly, which is great.
Still within the like defense tech kind of mindset, or broadly within the oh crap, we are spending money on AI specifically in Canada. We want to make sure that all the leadership that we have here, we capture and retain that
Hmm.
value. Aiden Gomez, CEO of Cohere, was very explicit, saying very similar things to you about the need to stay here in Canada, keep the value.
Hmm.
That he actually said acquisition to him is failure. We
Yes.
went very aggressive with it. Um, are you are you getting it more from like, hey, there's a new prime minister being like, we now have this former ally south of us doing and saying weird things all the time. Maybe we would also like to use this technology for cryptography, or is it more that traditional? Canada's been a leader in an industry and we actually haven't supported it and captured the value from it. So maybe let's solve that this time. Like, can you get a
Yeah.
sense or a read of why they're suddenly just wanting to spend more time talking with you?
You mean apart from me?
Yeah,
Like my
yeah.
personality?
Personality, vibes, great hang.
I think it's hard to tell, but what's great about quantum is it really transcends many different industries. And so it's probably all the suggestions you had then, it's probably ticking a lot of those. Definitely defense, AI and compute, that quantum has a role in that as well. So it really is a horizontal play. I think the question is, to your point about defense, it really is if the government does invest in quantum computing, it'll be just what vehicle is the best way to distribute the money.
Mm.
And so maybe it's through defense, maybe it's through BDC, maybe it's through, who knows what other sort of avenues. And as we've heard about procurement, the challenge is always through what mechanism that's already set up do we do it. So even if it's done through defense or someone else, I think that's kind of the thinking is we want to invest, but what's the best way to sort of do that? And I always joke that, the government has their money somewhere in a bank. We have our money probably in the same bank. Just e-transfer it to me. I can click accept the 10K limit every day if you want. So, but that's always been a challenge to work out how to do that. And I think that's kind of how it ties it all together.
Okay. I definitely take as granted that if quantum is as you are betting it will be, and many people assume, the next generation of like a baseline technology that is used in a variety of different ways, seeing a bunch of different use cases crop up makes a lot of sense. When it comes to the funding consideration, I think that's really interesting. We're going to talk about maybe money on the back end. Because you also, on our last time we were on this podcast together, stated some very hefty fundraising goals of like, hey, I need $200 million to make a quantum data center. I don't know how long that would take to accept if you're doing 10K transfers every day. Quite some time. I'm pretty sure a quantum computer could figure it out pretty quickly.
That's why we're building it. So it's a catch-22.
We're gonna build a quantum machine just for e-transfer.
And the e-transfer is to build a quantum computer.
Yes. Is you had noted throughout this process that you're building, like there's this ultimate goal, which again, quantum data centers, racked networked quantum computers, the value that can drive from there, and then all of these intermediary steps that you're taking, not only to develop the technology, receive funding for developing the technology, and then maybe offset some of the costs by selling the production value to other people who are interested in this. Is there a procurement angle or capacity right now for a company like Xanadu to say, we actually have something not only to sell, but we have customers who need this specific thing? Or is it way more on that commercialization journey where, yes, we can open up this packaging plant to other people that might need it, but that's just one little step on the ultimate goal of that quantum service that we're trying to deliver by insert X here. I'll get you to update us on your
2029 is what we're aiming for the data center. I would say yes in terms of an alternate, sort of a different type of revenue, but where our eye is on the prize of building this quantum data center. So that's when the world really opens for us, and that's when you can actually start getting crazy amounts of revenue, billions and tens of billions of dollars. So before that, the packaging for low loss is not on that scale. So it's a nice amount to sort of, one of the things that we're seeing now is venture capital is really looking for, a lot of them is requiring a minimum of $10 million ARR. And it's definitely understandable, and perhaps that's being kind of inserted due to their LPs. But it's also challenging for startups like Xanadu and others where it's not about the revenue at this point in time. And it's kind of challenging too because venture capital, it's starting to become like a requirement, like a private equity company, a minimum amount of ARR. That's not what venture is about. The word venture is to venture, to take risks.
Particularly from Silicon Valley. And if you want to look into the history of like where this comes from, it's in actually the development of hard things for future gains.
That no one else would fund.
Yeah.
So sure, if you're an investor, it'd be great. Oh, you got $10 million or $20 million ARR, because then it's like, it's a bit less of a no-brainer. But how do you venture for those things where it's like, I don't know if this is going to work out or not.
Okay.
And that's what quantum computing was a few years ago, but now it's looking more and more certain. There's still errors, uncertainty in everything in any business. It doesn't have to be quantum computing. but it's getting more and more certain now, which is really exciting.
Okay. So then I guess I want to untangle some of this and make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. It- when you're looking to drive some of this revenue, it's, a cost offset. There's strategic value for you owning some of this stuff. Is
Mhm.
one of the strategies just being like demonstrating, hey, in these very, very targeted ways that will not ultimately reflect the billions upon billions of dollars that we might be able to produce when we at the outcome, we can demonstrate that we can monetize components of
Yes.
this to be a little bit more open. Because
Yes. If you gave me, say, $1 billion and saying I can do with it what I want, we wouldn't be focusing on outsourcing this stuff or sort
at
of
all,
selling it to others at all.
you just go away,
We'd go away,
produce the
let
thing,
us
and
be. We'll come back in 2029, and here it is here. Now, it's not the end of the world because, so to answer your question, yes, we need to do this for investors. Imagine taking the other side of the argument. If you're an investor, is there other stuff that can kind of de-risk things for me? While they're making money from something else, it's all about validation. That's what they're
yeah,
looking for, and
traction.
revenue
They're just looking for
traction,
traction.
exactly. And traction is really well. There's so many quantum companies now. You're saying Xanadu is the
Mm,
best. It's very hard to do due diligence on the
yes.
technology, and so they look for other sort of proxies for that, and revenue is one of them. So
Okay.
I get it, but it
It's not
does.
enough to say, hey, we're losing less light. Isn't that enough for you guys?
They don't listen to me for some reason when I say that. It's very frustrating.
Okay. I want to talk just a little bit more about the venture component, but first on the government side, the reason why I asked that question of where the interest is coming from and how you navigate it is because traditionally, there's two bookends of failure when it comes to government support.
Hmm.
It's either we don't want to pick winners, so we're not very interested in giving one company $1 billion. Noting for our audience that Christian has 5x his fundraising ask since the last time he's been on this podcast. Just a straight B. Let's keep it really, really
I
simple.
technically asked you for it.
That's fair. We're still talking to our LP investors. Apparently, they're just not available during the summer.
Oh.
But then on the other side, the procurement process, whether or not you have services to sell to demonstrate that traction, is like not functional in this country. So I was interested in maybe mostly where you feel like, and or whether the government is still exploring the best mechanism through which you want them to engage
Mhm.
and they feel like they can engage.
Well, when us and others talk to the government, they ask us these sorts of things, and we look at where we've gotten money before. Strategic Innovation Fund, so I
Mhm.
said that's kind of one delivery system for the capital. Another one is BDC. We've managed to get money from their deep tech fund
Yep.
historically. Um, IRAP, I guess, is another one. So EDC, there's quite a few. There's also the Canadian Growth Fund as well. It
Mhm.
has like 15 billion.
Yep.
So I think the mechanisms are there already. BDC would be great, for instance. So we suggest stuff like this with mechanisms already set up, and so I think that's
Okay.
for us the easiest way, and also for it to, any money is appreciated, but a direct investment, I think, is the best thing rather than sort of a loan like SIF, which we're very happy to get, but fund us. And I'm a
Because
tax.
it's a loan that you have to pay back, but then we've reported on BetaKit, there are companies that have lost their SIF funding because they didn't hit a certain milestone or
That's
laid off
right.
certain
That's
employees,
right.
or it's conditional enough because
Hmm.
again, government doesn't want to pick winners.
Hmm.
So keep showing that you're winning, and we won't have picked you. We'll have just gotten lucky. But
Yeah.
that can also be a turnaround if you guys reach a hiccup, right?
That's true, yeah, and so I think we're near the end of getting all of our $40 million. So the team was able to hit the milestones, which is
Okay.
good.
So I guess what I'm hearing from you is that you would prefer that the traditional government mechanisms that are pre-established start embracing quantum and let's say just say hardware innovation in their portfolio rather than say a specialized AI compute fund that is a separate envelope for maybe a specific either poorly or very sharply defined outcome.
Yeah, I agree. And one example that we have heard about is I mentioned Xanadu and others are in this QBI program in DARPA. Um, why not create our own Canadian version of that? There's 3 main companies, including Xanadu, that are world leaders in Canada for quantum computing. If you've been accepted in phase 1, then a certain amount of due diligence has been done by the US government. So why not already, because the due diligence stuff is the tough part. But if it's already been done by US government, it's great to have a sister program or its own program that allows the Canadian companies to go through. And the direct investment, I think, is important because let's say the government does a loan, then the upside is the loan is paid back with interest.
Mhm.
The downside is they lose it. The same downside is there if they invest equity in us or others. So the downside is they lose it. So nothing's changed there. But if someone like a Xanadu is super successful, their initial investment could pay back the taxpayers a lot, 10 or 100 times. So from a taxpayer point of view, it seems like the money is still coming from taxes either way, but you're now getting the super upshot
Mhm.
of a successful company. And again, the worst case scenario is still the same with a loan as
Okay.
well.
So you're asking for the government to be a little bit more ambitious in these
Yes.
mechanisms?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. And I'm not sure about kind of this sprinkler strategy, where, it's sprinkled bits of water around
Yes.
everywhere.
That was something that Minister Solomon said. It's like you can't sprinkler on innovation. I think he's like the implication there is that he was going to have a fire hose that he's going to target at
Yeah, build a
things.
pool
Yeah.
instead of a sprinkler if you're going to get cooled down.
Yeah.
Build something great. I think the US doesn't have that hang up, of like, let's support all, a lot of, instead of 1 or 2, let's support many of them. Then kind of we all just end up in the middle of the ground. No one fails because we support as many as possible, but we all just end up average.
Yeah.
Why not, invest in a few smaller bets, but then the payoff is much bigger? Because quantum computing and also AI are great examples where if you do that, there's many offshoot industries that are capable of coming that many people can benefit from, not just quantum computing.
You're just taking over Lake Ontario waterfront, building your own little
Exactly.
production facility.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go back to the DARPA component because we're drawing comparisons of approaches and mechanisms and infrastructure. Canada was supposed to have its own DARPA,
Right.
and then it became the Canada Innovation Corporation.
Oh, what happened to that? It was before my time.
No, well, it hasn't happened because the last Liberal government announced it, didn't source a CEO to lead it, and then said that they were going to come back around to it after the election.
Oh.
The Liberals are still in power
Mhm.
under completely new leadership.
Mhm.
So I guess the pessimism that a lot of people saw at the end of 2024 about whether or not CIC would ever actually come to fruition, who knows? Have you heard from anyone that like, hey, maybe a Canadian DARPA is the right mechanism, either through the CIC or a separate organization? Because, we had Dan Bresnitz on this podcast talking about how the initial conception was a Canadian DARPA, and then the mandate shifted slightly, I think for some good reasons, other, political government reasons.
Mhm.
Have you heard anybody being like, oh yeah, Canadian DARPA?
Well, we definitely say it. I didn't know there was a history there, and it sounds like a very recent history.
I'm just going to keep pointing up here, and we're going to keep putting podcast links up to other conversations that we've had.
Yeah, I mean, that's great because we didn't know about that, but we've always been pushing for it. So, we've the idea was, we're thinking about ourselves, obviously, but this is our 4th DARPA program we're part of. And we were always thinking and suggesting to people, the due diligence has been done. We've been accepted in a DARPA. There should be some program, whether it's an active or passive Canadian DARPA. It could just very well be passive. So if you get $500K from DARPA, you'll automatically be allocated $500K from the Canadian government.
Gotcha. Like there's some like due diligence pass through.
It's already done. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think that would be a great idea. Now, if it wants to be a non-passive or kind of an active thing, I think that would be great as well. The other thing I can tell you for sure is that we have a lot of great researchers here in Canada from the quantum computing side of things. They're very, very good. And I don't know if there's just as many, but they're equally good as the US counterparts. So it's not like we're lacking the ability to do due diligence on quantum computing. We have that talent here.
Yeah. And we've had Quantiset on the podcast talking about levels of sexiness of quantum technology. They're trying to build that quantum corridor in Quebec.
Yes,
You will, I
nice.
guess, compete with here.
Mhm.
It's all along one river and goes out to the Atlantic anyway. So I'm assuming that the
That's
innovation
where we
can
all end
travel.
up, in the
Yeah,
Atlantic.
basically, if we do it right. Okay. We were speaking about how maybe the federal government, in this moment of interest in sovereignty, innovation, IP, all that good stuff, pools, not sprinklers, modifying their approach, maybe embracing a greater sense of risk or embracing the same amount of risk with higher upside.
Mm.
You were also talking about the venture consideration, and it seems like they're adding higher degree of conditions to get that capital.
Yes, for sure.
I'm pretty sure around this time was when you were to have secured $200 million based upon our last podcast conversation.
I remember saying we were going to start raising.
Yes.
I'll have to. Do I go this? I just have to rewatch it.
We just point up, and then an episode link appears, and then someone in the comments can tell us.
Yeah. I was mentioning to a few folks last year that we will start our $200 million raise. That was actually the start of that was out of our hands because we were waiting for our new Nature paper to be published, and it's always good once that was published. So that was ended up being delayed and published in January. So we've slowly started a few months ago. We also had another Nature paper by the team, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So all this stuff helps with due diligence for investors. Yeah. So we're raising up to 200. Honestly, it's the money's there, but it's a different climate to when we raised last time. And we've got a few now that are doing due diligence on us. So fingers crossed. We'll get there. It's just how long does it take, and how much can we raise in the end? But complete confidence we'll get there.
Will it be Canadian money?
I'm trying so hard. I'm trying to do at least 100 million, maybe 200 million, all Canadian raise. Okay. I'm pushing so hard on that. The money is there. Is the
will?
It's a little bit different. I don't think we have a lot of, it seems more and more folks are helping with the seed and pre-seed sort of phase, the angel investing. There's a lot more help there from my understanding. Less so so this will be our Series D. Yeah. So the risky long-term patient capital is not there where we are at the moment. So for Series D, a normal company will be having a lot of customers, a lot of revenue. And
past. You're like almost like it's seed stage in terms of product market fit.
That's right.
But again, differences between software and hardware companies.
That's right. Yeah.
Like just that the R&D curve is so much more important, right?
I've thought about that too. And you're exactly right. That's how I see it. Now, the upshot, and it's a huge upshot, is that this is something, if we can pull it off in Canada, is going to change the world. Like it really is up there with the internet and digital computing, the integrated chip. So in some sense, if you've got something that's going to be world changing, it has to have these annoying characteristics of you don't fit in. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs just personally feel like they don't fit in, but quantum computing doesn't fit in. And we've had that at every stage of our development. But, if you look at getting back to the Canadian angle, we had OMAs do seed and Series A. And then last round, Series B was Georgian. The one before was Bessemer, a US-based entity. But, 3 of the rounds have been Canadian-led. So I do believe we can have an all-Canadian raise. We're working very, very hard. We are talking to people all around the world. We have good relationships with many investors. But that would be our first choice.
Okay. Let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, Christian will have either closed the round or we're going to call bullshit on a couple quantum innovation claims.
This week's episode of the BetaKit Podcast is presented by Cisco. Cisco recently released its third Cybersecurity Readiness Index, which pulls data from 8,000 companies around the world, and this year's takeaway isn't subtle. Even as businesses race to adopt new tech to shore up their cyber defenses, most are still woefully unprepared for the threats that lie ahead. To explore these findings and learn how businesses can better prepare for emerging threats, we spoke with Robert Barton, CTO of Cisco Canada. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. So to start us off, what is the Cybersecurity Readiness Index, or CRI?
Yeah, so the Cybersecurity Readiness Index, and I'll call it the CRI just because it comes out a lot easier when you just call it the acronym. It's actually the third year now that we've produced this report. It's a survey, really, we've done of companies around the world. So we've allowed companies to respond to this, and it's a double-blind survey, so they don't know who's asking and we don't know who's responding. And they really are able to, hopefully in a very honest way, assess themselves. So they will be asked questions around identity, around machine trustworthiness, network resilience, cloud security. And at the end of it, we'll sort of assess a score. And based on their score, we can come up with a measurement of just how ready that organization is. And typically we'll put them into one of four categories. Either they're beginner, which means they're really, really open and insecure. They're formative, which means they're sort of developing. They're kind of getting things together, but not quite there yet. Progressive would be, this is much better. They're funding security protection. They're building those defenses, but still they know they have open gaps. And mature would be, they have a very sophisticated, very well-developed, and of course mature system where they feel they can actually not just protect, but also respond to attacks as they occur.
So let's get into the data. What do you think is the biggest takeaway from the 2025 CRI?
To me, the biggest takeaway is just how underprepared companies are to deal with the AI threat. I think we're seeing massive adoption of generative AI. And I think especially in the last year, companies are starting to get out of that sort of get to know you phase, and they're really starting to use it for business purposes. And they're starting to use it in ways that we would have never imagined even 12 months ago. And all this is great. It improves efficiencies, but it opens an entirely new threat surface that simply wasn't there 24 months ago. And grappling with that, how do you secure an entirely new field of battle? I think that becomes apparent in the report, just how few companies feel they are prepared.
How do you think organizations should approach AI as both a cybersecurity asset and a potential threat vector?
And that's an interesting question because it shows that we sort of have an AI arms race going on right now between the bad guys and the good guys. We need to use generative AI and all the power that AI has to organize and find patterns in data to defend against these kinds of attacks. And that's where it gives us a tool that we just never had before. Most organizations will have 50 to 80 different security vendors for every possible type of problem in defending their network. But how do you collect all that information together, make sense of it, and more importantly, respond quickly when an event actually happens? And that's where I think AI is becoming a very, very powerful tool. In a report, we showed that now 68% of organizations are doing that. They're starting to use AI as a defensive mechanism. And if you're not, I'm sorry, that you're going to be a very, very vulnerable target.
You mentioned this off the top, but also Cisco's data showed that only 3% of organizations consider themselves prepared. In practical terms, what does it mean to have a mature cybersecurity posture in 2025?
We always start with a security policy. That policy will be refined and mature, reviewed. It will be implemented. And perhaps one of the most important things is that you test yourself. I always liken this to, when we're back in elementary school, they do fire drills. That type of practice scenario is what mature companies do for cybersecurity. You're preparing by running scenarios so that when the cyber attack happens, you don't have to pull the plug on everything. You have a team that's been adequately prepared for such an event. What we see when a real cyber attack happens is timing is everything. How quickly you can respond to the attack, find out where it is, understand the kill chain of the attack. That is the difference between an organization which will withstand it and one that gets taken down.
If so few organizations feel prepared, though, something must be getting in the way. From your perspective, what's the biggest barrier? Is this a mindset issue? Is it budget? Is there a skills gap? Or is it just how fast everything's changing right now?
When we look at the CRI, we can see that funding is still suffering. IT organizations are not budgeting enough for cybersecurity defenses. It's like buying insurance. You may not use it, but you're going to be a lot safer because you have it. And sadly, I think a big part of it too is complacency. People just feel like I haven't been hit yet, so I don't need to invest in it. The ones that tend to invest the most are the ones that just got hit and got taken down for several days. Their databases got compromised, or there was a ransomware attack and it became very well publicized. So one of our goals in this report is to just raise awareness that this should be a wake-up call. There is a lot of complacency still out there. And if we can just get over that, think about what it takes to get to mature and those steps involved. We should see overall postures improve over time.
Want to assess your cybersecurity posture? Take Cisco's cybersecurity readiness assessment and get your personalized score at cisco.com/ca/cybersecurity-readiness today.
All right, we are back, and I want to make this part of the conversation a little bit more of that quantum technology on Sesame Street level. Like, let's educate the audience base.
Okay.
And also just, I think there's a lot of people just interested in this technology, how it's being developed, what it's being used for. I know from BetaKit when we cover this, because there is this groundswell of really, really cool Canadian quantum companies, including Xanadu, which we noted in our most ambitious issue, as well as a couple of others. Everyone seems to be making some sort of breakthrough, which I think is a component of two things. Deep tech, bleeding edge of the horizon. You know, if you're not discovering new things out there, you're doing something wrong. And then a desire to garner traction and interest because you need the capital to keep doing this stuff. So I'm hoping that you can help me understand, as someone who doesn't understand quantum technology at all, despite having interviewed you several times now, what is real and what is hype. Noting that we even just covered recently, Xanadu made a claim of a breakthrough for error-resistant photonic quantum bits, or qubits. Hype, complete hype. Will you start, sir, in this game of real or hype by explaining your own recent breakthrough, and if it's fully legit or if you're just passing along some qubits to show traction to investors? What is going on with these error-resistant photonic qubits?
Yeah, so we call these qubits GKP qubits. That's after the authors who came up with it 25 years ago. And it took 25 years. People thought, 25 years ago, it's not possible to do this. And the team showed how to create these error-resistant qubits using light, and we're able to put it on an integrated chip, a world first. Obviously I'm biased. I don't think it's hype. We actually got it published in Nature, the journal Nature, which is one of the best science journals in the world. So other people also thought that, and it was a very, big milestone for us. So definitely I'll call that one real. It comes back to that loss that we were talking about. Okay. So the qubits don't like the loss. It kind of messes them up a bit. Okay. And so having more robust qubits, they can kind of tolerate a little bit more loss. We still need to do more. So we need to go into error correction and fault tolerance even more. But this was an important kind of foundation for our journey ahead in terms of error correction.
Okay. This is the type of thing that turns it from a technology into a functional tool that people can use because it's got that reliability.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Let's talk now about D-Wave, formerly a Canadian quantum company that is relocated to the United States. Tough look for Canada. They had said earlier this year, I think it was around March or April, that they had achieved quantum supremacy. There's been a variety of claims on this regard. They said it was the first and only demonstration of quantum computational supremacy on a useful real-world problem. We talked to a bunch of other quantum leaders across Canada, including the fine folks at Quantisat, and I think even Photonics, another most ambitious included company. And what we got in response was like, it's tough to prove this. And because there's no definition of like what quantum supremacy really means, it seems to be like a floating point. And solving one real world problem, like it doesn't really showcase robust progress towards something. Do you have issue with companies like D-Wave making these claims? We're on your hype to real level. Where would you put Xanadu or D-Wave? Is like error correction more important than like, hey, we actually use this tool to solve a problem? Like how do you dumb game conceits aside, how do you view these stages of progress and development so that we can look at them and see, like, is this the functional equivalent of a D-Wave claiming that their Sega Genesis has blast processing and therefore is better than the Super Nintendo? Or is there something here that is worthwhile and meaningful, even if not ultimately as cool as the label quantum supremacy might sound?
Well, I think I always go to the end picture. So the end goal is to really build a quantum data center. So no one's there yet. And as mentioned, we need to build that. We'll build that in 2029. So no one is there where we want to be yet, but it's not too far away. That's kind of the North Star. In terms of D-Wave, first off, I think it's amazing that they're into their 26th year. That's incredible for any startup or company. So
they actually started on a couple of Sega Genesis's tapes together. That's how long they've been around.
And so
I'm gonna get in trouble for that joke, but I don't mind.
So they're getting to their paper. It was, I think, published in Nature, so that's hard to do. So that was great for them. Real world is kind of where the kind of debate probably starts. Is we would define real world applications as, in terms of the end goal, is people are paying a lot of money for these applications, and I don't think it's there yet for them for that application.
Okay.
It may have been, I can go back to our quantum supremacy demonstration. We were clear. It was for an esoteric math problem, and which is, which is fine. It was very hard to do, and the team did an amazing job. And that showed a math problem that would have taken 7 million years to solve. We solved it in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But we were clear that it doesn't have any real world value or any business application. So I think D-Wave sounds like they did something similar, but maybe it was more towards something of physical significance rather than a math problem. But still, I don't think it's a true business use case yet.
Okay. And then would you say maybe some of the, without picking on D-Wave specifically, some of maybe the energy behind how loudly, voraciously these companies communicate their breakthrough is dependent upon whether or not maybe they are a privately held company versus a publicly traded company, like the need to showcase continual developments versus like, we set the team on this. Look, it's really cool. We have very smart people. We're also doing a bunch of other things. You have always seemed to be, to me, very, very practical in your approach of engaging with media, communicating what the company's doing separate from the technological considerations. Like, and maybe that's just coming from a place of like your ultimate goal is a data center, which is like a very pragmatic decision using super cool tech with 1,000 different caveats. Is there, am I reading too much into that? Is there something there? Or is it just easier not being a publicly traded company and not having something to announce in a quarter that might impact your share price or something like that?
Well, I think you're right. I see the same way. There's a lot of announcements, whether you're public or private companies, and it all comes back to money. So you can think of it as public companies wanting to keep their stock price at a certain level or go higher, and private companies doing it because they're currently fundraising. So it all comes back to money. I would say it's hard to know. I would say one criticism people have of us is that we don't really promote ourselves as much as others. So sometimes I don't really know it's a fine line because you're trying to publicize your stuff for funding. We're doing that too, but also to get higher talent as well. So, it's hard to know what's right because you're going to get criticized either way. You get criticized for saying you're not promoting yourself enough. And then when you promote yourself, you're going to get criticized by other people saying you're promoting yourself too much. I think there's some middle ground. And honestly, I think after this current fundraise, we'll think about maybe doing more media and stuff. One thing we have never done is any announcement, we've had a paper published along with our announcement. So far it's been good, but a lot of companies now announce something just as a blog post.
They're building in public a little bit more.
Yeah. And so maybe we should do some more of that. But I don't know is the answer. My gut is that we've done it right so far, and maybe we can kind of do a little bit more publicity and hype, so to speak, but still stay within the framework, the foundations that we find comfortable.
Okay. I want to maybe modify what I said, because I said building in public, but then I also realize those companies are not also going through the rigorous peer reviewing that is required to be published in a paper.
Yes.
They're just putting stuff out there. And as we've seen in the AI space, it's very, very easy to make, omniscient claims or vague tweets to drive engagement and have nothing underneath. So I think it would be cool to see more communication from you. As part of the reason why we really like having you on, it's very easy to engage with this technology and what you're trying to do with it, speaking with you, and still have that grounding. I got one final real or hype question for you here. And this was actually coming from John Fingus, our deputy editor. He was asking, he wanted me to ask you about Microsoft's Majorana 1 and whether or not you think we really need a new state of matter to make quantum work?
I would say it doesn't matter if it's a great candidate, that's fine. But the Microsoft stuff is, I think, very good from like their last big milestone was published in Nature. And from an academic point of view, it was really interesting. But I remember searching the paper and I couldn't find the word qubit anywhere. But then when you read the PR, the press release and everything, it was all about quantum computing. So I think there's a disconnect, given you're a large company in Microsoft, between the researchers and the PR department, which is what it is. But in that paper, I think it was a really excellent academic paper. It was a great paper to be published and contribute to the literature. Now, but then the PR folks had to do their job. And there was a real disconnect between what the paper said and what they actually achieved.
Okay.
And so that can be challenging sometimes. I mean, the plus on that is quantum computing got even more, because it was Microsoft, got even more publicity, like the field. So rising tide sort of thing was helpful there.
Well, and then you get NVIDIA commenting on it, and then everyone feels like they need to respond because like the richest tech company in the world says something about another technology, and every stock tied to that technology either goes up or down.
Yes, yeah.
It's interesting, actually. I really appreciate that you kind of have the capacity to view all of these things in different hats, whether it's like the pure scientific or like the practical business considerations. I was wondering if you're the type of person, you don't come across this way, but if you had any deeply held scientific, like, electric versus internal combustion engine, like, no, it's got to be this way. Like you're cool with whatever gets to the solution or outcome.
Yeah, we would obviously like Xanadu to be there, but stepping away from that, I think quantum computing would be very good for the world. We just got to get to this quantum data center and beyond, any of us. So we've always taken the viewpoint that, we can't be arrogant and think we're the only approach. I think photonics is a wonderful approach. I do think it'll be one of the winners, but we won't be the only winner. And I think there's a lot of smart people using different approaches. I think there's, at last count, someone said nearly 500 quantum computing companies around the world. A lot of them are software, which is a different type of quantum company, and quite a few hardware. But I don't think it'll be just one winner. I think there'll be a few. And also the areas like AI, material design, quantum chemistry, drug discovery, there's so many for everyone to kind of dig into and kind of own. So
500 actually sounds like a lot until you look at any other sector of technology and realize that's like a drop in the bucket, which shows how much bigger the pie can get, right?
That's true, yeah.
Okay. Going through this, I'm wondering if maybe this is tying back to past conversations or in support of this kind of development. Raquel Erdesen, CEO of Wabi, was on stage at Homecoming for Toronto Tech Week, kind of just talking about her space. Now she's in physical AI. She's trying to move trucks around using AI. So kind of playing in two similar spheres of view of futuristic tech, but then like with physical things, there's like logistical considerations to making sure that truck gets to where it needs to be. And she was talking about how the federal government, while it has a lot of AI support, doesn't have a robust regulatory environment or support mechanism for these kind of like physical hard innovations. Would you group yourself into that? Would you agree with her? What sort of like regulatory environment do you need for quantum? Or are we way too early because like people don't have the ChatGPT equivalent to fuck around with for us to all to say maybe we should be regulating this technology yet?
I just don't know whether it's too early or it's just not applicable at this point. You can imagine, people
the minute someone cracks a password using a quantum computer, I think it's going to be immediately applicable.
Yeah, I'm coming for yours first. What's your username? You don't have to tell me your password. It just makes it a little bit easier. Your email. I'll go with your email.
Yeah, it's just first name, not last name.
Yeah, it's you can imagine things like needing regulation if you're going to do driverless cars in a city. Quantum doesn't really have that at the moment. So the answer is it's not an issue for us at the moment. To your point, it could be when we have a ChatGPT moment, but I think the first version of that won't be for the consumers. It'll be for B2B sort of companies and material design, drug discovery, and they'll have their own regulations already.
Yes.
So
because they're utilizing the technology within a compliance framework. And
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. If it seems very, very clear that the the cycle of the distribution of the technology that you're working on is going to go in a much more traditional format than say AI has with like the rise of chatbots.
I think so.
Not only from the DARPA like government funding to business, then to consumer. Like it'll be interesting to see like, do we need personal quantum computers? That seems to be on a similar time scale that we've seen over the last 30 years from like home PC to cloud to mobile and stuff.
Yeah, I see it the same way. I don't think why are people talking about AI regulations? It's because I think of AGI, right? Like what's the worst case scenario where it has consciousness or anything like that, which can now threaten humanity. And then you see ChatGPT as kind of a very early proxy for that. For me, I'm not worried about AI. I can't see AGI happening this decade or even the decade after. And I think you need something like quantum computing, something that's not binary, basically, not ones and zeros. You need something like quantum physics to help there.
I don't think it's because of AGI. I think AGI is actually the closer corollary than even the Wabi example of like the type of space that you're playing in. I think it's because one, tons of people are using it every day. Like the average consumer is playing with this at a level of adoption much faster than like mobile technology or other things. Two, the way that a lot of this technology has been predicated on has been breaking copyright laws. So the data sets that have been built in the training like is fundamentally in conflict with existing law, which creates a regulatory conversation. And then the third reason, and we again pointing up, we had a podcast about this recently, like 50% of the internet is autonomous agent traffic, and a third of it is driving mis and disinformation. So like the harms are much more immediate than anything that you're playing with right now. I'd be like wondering if you could even think of an equivalent harm other than maybe that cryptography example that we discussed off the top.
Maybe there's a big physical harm. If you came to an office, I could push the server rack on you. Quantum computers are very deadly.
It's true. They're very large.
Yeah, very, very, very heavy and large. Yeah.
The room house has to be very, very cold too. I guess I could freeze to death.
You could freeze you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
On that point, I want to ask you maybe, because again, we did a whole episode. You were very, very gracious with your time, explaining to me and Rob Kennedy some fundamental components of quantum tech so that we could have a conversation with you. We're talking about adoption, awareness, support at either the venture or government level, and then all the work that you need to do to get to delivery. What's one thing that you wish people kind of understood about quantum better, or your space more specifically? Because we talked a lot about, there's the research component and then the comms teams at these companies get involved and there's a disconnect. What do you want the average person to know about this stuff? Either to be excited about it, to be skeptical about it, maybe even wary?
I think perhaps to know that the use cases, there are some, but to sort of realize that perhaps the greatest use cases, we don't know what they are just yet. We need a quantum data center where people can play around with it over the cloud to really discover what it can do. It comes back to this. I'd be very surprised if that doesn't happen in quantum, because there's an old phrase that says information is physical. And that means to have a computer, it needs to be a physical thing. It needs to be electronics, electrons. You need something to carry the information. And that information is really, because it's physical, it's governed by physics. And we've really only leveraged, classical physics for decades now. So that's a small subset of quantum physics. So imagine now if information is physical, it should be information is quantum physical. And so it should just open up a whole new way of doing computing. And I hope for people to realize that our world will potentially look very different to the way it is now once quantum computers become mainstream. And that makes it very, very, very exciting, allows us to kind of work all the time and be thinking ahead and, just trying to do something big here in Canada.
That is the perfect place to end it. I don't want to think about how much time it's going to take you to do that. And maybe what might happen to information in the interim with all these chatbots in the midst. But let's get to quantum physical information and see where that goes. Christian, I really appreciate you coming on, man, talking through the traction, I guess, that Xanadu has been shown. And I look forward to coming back, which time you'll be asking for $5 billion. All he needs is $5 billion, and then he can build the whole
Should you put
thing.
your pinky in your mouth when you
Yes. Only will you do it with me?
Sure.